Alright guys, this is not a fishing video. As a lot of you who are subscribers to my channel know, I've been building fishing rod jigs for quite a while now, and part of the process that I've been going through in manufacturing those is figuring out different ways of speeding up the production. I come up with this the other day. It's a little setup here for quickly drilling the holes I need in these jigs. The jigs that I build use 31 different holes in one complete jig assembly. That takes quite a while to set all that up if you're laying the holes out by hand, and I'll show you real quick how I was doing that in the past. So the way I was laying these jigs out was I had some particle board templates of the holes that I needed, and I would take my pieces and I would use a transfer punch and a hammer to mark my hole locations, and then bring it over to the drill press and drill it. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but if you're making several items at once, if you want to manufacture something out of your home like I'm doing and try to build them in a pretty speedy manner, that's not a real efficient way of doing it. So what I've done here is actually come up with a jig system to use on the drill press that I thought other people might get some ideas from. This isn't a video really that's going to show you step by step how to do this. It's more of a video to help give people some ideas, because there's really not a lot of information about trying to do some small time manufacturing out of your home like I'm doing here. I looked on YouTube trying to find something that could help reduce the time I spend on the drill press and laying out holes and things. I really didn't find a whole lot on YouTube about it. So I was going to put this video out there, and hopefully it'll help somebody out, or at least give somebody some ideas, you know, that they might be able to expand upon and come up with their own way of doing things. Real quick, I want to show you the most important thing about this whole setup, and it's something you might want to consider if you're looking at doing something like this. Now, of course, if you're building a one-off item, you know, you're just building something for yourself, you don't need all this. You can just lay your holes out and go in and drill your holes by hand, and it's not a big deal. But if you want to make a lot of something, it really helps to have jigs. And I've set up all kinds of jigs now to make this process of building these rod wrapping jigs faster. The biggest thing, the biggest challenge if you're using a drill press like I am, I've got 3 drill presses, and this is kind of a homeowner's type small wood shop drill press. It's a Skill 10-inch, and it's not anything major, definitely not heavy duty. It's light duty, I would say. One of the challenges you'll run into when you're trying to set up a jig on a drill press is every time you raise and lower the table, it throws everything off. Now, this drill press has a laser built into it, and the laser is supposed to be there to help you identify the center point of your holes, and it does that okay. I really think it's better suited for something like this. What this laser does is it lays down a crosshatch pattern, and I will turn it on so you can see it here and turn this light out. Hopefully you'll be able to see things a little more clearly. Now you can see that laser has laid out that crosshatch pattern. What I did here was, before I put this little fence and this little piece here, before I attached those to this table, I laid it out and drilled a hole in the center, turned the laser on, and marked this crosshatch area. That allows me now to move this table around. You know, the tables on these things swivel and pivot. Well, that's a lot of work to try to line that up once you do that. Ordinarily, I was using a rod at first. When I thought about doing this, I was going to use a rod to help line this up by putting it in a chuck. That's a kind of a pain too. So I was like, well, this laser on here, it lays down a consistent beam. So if I line up the crosshatch with the marks that I made here, then I can line this table up in different positions. So if I need to raise it or lower it, or move it around to do something else and come back to it, I can do all that, and I really don't have to take this table off of here. Like I said, I've got other drill presses. I've got a big one that I use for most of my heavy drilling, and it's a lot better machine than this one. Again, this is just kind of a light duty machine. But for this application, if you're looking at setting up some sort of jigs like this, you might want to think about looking at a drill press that has a laser on it like this, that will lay down this crosshatch pattern, because that really makes realigning the table really fast and easy. Now, what I'm doing here, this work is not extremely precision-oriented work. It's kind of akin to woodworking, even though I'm building these jigs out of plastic. If I'm off a little here and there, very slightly, it's not going to affect anything. I've allowed for a little play in my screw hole sizes and things like that to compensate for any small margin of error that I might have as I'm drilling holes and things. So, in my opinion, probably the biggest takeaway anybody would have from this video is using a crosshatch laser guide to help you realign your jig and your table if you have to move things around. Now, as you go to tighten the table back down, you might have to make a little adjustment here or there, knock it one way or the other just a little bit until it gets completely tightened down, because as you tighten them, they usually want to shift a little and things. So keep that in mind. You know, you don't just turn the laser on, get it lined up, and then turn the laser off and go tighten your table down, because it will move on you. So that's something to keep in mind. But I think this might be the biggest takeaway from this video. And then maybe if I show you how this jig setup works, then maybe that will give you some other ideas that you could use also. What I've done is, in order to drill my holes, I made some different spacers. And I'll just show you, for example, here I can put this spacer in to drill my second hole that I use on this part right here, and so on down the line. This one part has 6 different holes in it, so you can see where having something like this would really speed this process of drilling all these holes up. And if you're doing, just say I'm making 10 of these today, I could drill all 10 of those this hole before putting in the spacer, and then do 10 of the next hole, and so on. So you're not constantly moving the spacers in and out. You do as many as you're going to build at that time, and do the same hole on each one, and then move on to the next one, to the next hole spacing, using your different spacers until you're finished. So this is the part that I started out with, and I initially started out to build a jig for each operation, and I saw pretty quick how that could be a little bit more time consuming than I wanted. So what I did was design other tables to fit this table to do other operations. And then I've just labeled everything so I know where they go. But this is another table that will mount to this table. And the way that I've worked this out is I've got this fence will ride on this fence, and then I've got this locator pin here that will drop in this hole. So when I get ready to switch over to this operation, I can drop this right into place. And now I'm ready to put my piece in here that gets this hole drilled. So by doing that, I've created another jig that operates off the same base, and I've got a third one also, and it does the same thing. It's got a locator pin, and I wasn't really worried about how long they were. They dropped straight down through the table that come on the drill press, and this one I made a little shorter, but this one was pretty long. It really doesn't make any difference. You just drop it in there. And on these additional tables, I've also marked the crosshatch that the laser lays down on these. That way I can go align everything back up. This one does the same thing. It's got a fence here that rides on this fence, and I drop it in place, get it lined up with the laser, tighten everything down, and I'm ready to do this operation. So that really was, to me, a good idea. This really speeds things up a whole lot. And I'll show you just a little bit. I'll run it for a little bit and let you see what you think. And hopefully somebody will be able to use this to their advantage. Just real quickly on this table, I built a corner here, pushed it into place on the existing table on the drill press, clamp it down so I can get it to line up the right way. And you can always go back and double check it with the crosshatch on the laser. And honestly, if I was building something like this and I was trying to put multiple jigs on the same table, kind of like I'm doing here, even though it's the same base, I'm putting different platforms into this base. If I were doing something like that, I would probably really think about getting something with a laser on it or adding some sort of an aftermarket setup, because this really is a huge time saver, and I think that might be the most important thing on this whole video, and I think that really might help some people out. If the video gets any views and people actually see what I've done here, that's very handy. It's hard to beat that. It lines everything up. The laser always shines a light in the same spot, and that will get you really close, and definitely close enough for the type of projects I'm doing. Really, realistically, if I'm off a couple hundredths, that's usually what I'm looking at, which is not much of an error, especially when you're talking about woodworking type projects, which this is more akin to woodworking, what I do with these, than it is metalworking, which requires a lot more precision. Wood, plastic is a lot more forgiving, so you've got a little more margin for error there. But this also allows me to make everything consistent. So I've sold 50 of these jigs to date, and that's not a huge number, but it's also kind of a specialty thing. There's not just a ton of people that are out there building their own fishing rods, so it's not a huge in-demand item. So for me, selling 50 of them in the time period that I've been offering them for sale, that's a pretty good number. And the reason why I'm trying to streamline the process is because I've actually been reached out to by a couple of people that recommended a few different things and making these available in some different ways, and before I can commit to that, I need to get to the point where there's a little more accuracy, there's a little more consistency, and I can speed the process up a whole lot more in order to meet demand. So that's part of the reason why I've been trying to streamline my processes somewhat. So I'll just go through and drill some holes, and maybe you'll get an idea of what a setup like this could do for you. I'll probably just speed the footage up because I'm sure no one really wants to see the whole thing in real time, but if I speed it up some, you can see how handy it is to have these different tables that fit all on the same platform, and allows for doing some different things without having to make too many changes on the table itself. So I'm just going to go through the process here, drill some holes, and I'll probably just do several different parts. I've got my crosshatch lined up here, so I'm ready to start the first operation. Now on these, I'll flip them over to do the next hole.